Yeah. Ha ha, go waggy waggy, hey hey, go wagaloo. Ha ha, go waggy waggy, hee hee, go wagaloo.
Marjorie's mother was a Yiddish poet named Eliza Greenblatt. And Eliza and Isidore Greenblatt were Marjorie's parents. She was one of 5 children. They had immigrated from what is now the Ukraine, from a shtetl outside of Russia, and immigrated in the early 1900s here to America. And they landed in Atlantic City in New Jersey. And then when my grandmother was about to go to high school, they moved to Philadelphia. And she lived there for a number of years, and that's where the family remained. And my grandmother moved to New York to join the Martha Graham Dance Company when she was a teenager. She had been rehearsing with another group outside of the company, a smaller group run by a woman named Sophie Maslow. And she, in her creative work, created a segment of dance set to Woody's Dust Bowl ballad.
And she said, instead of using the record, I'm going to ask Woody if he would do it in person on the stage, because I think it would be so effective. When I heard her say that, I said, Sophie, I am going with you to look for Woody. And I came to what was then Almanac House. There was a great big loft on 6th Avenue down here in the village. And I remember picturing in my mind what Woody was going to look like. You see, I hadn't seen a picture of him, but I had pictured a very tall, thin man and sort of thinking of Oklahoma cowboy. I could see the boots and the high hat and the kerchief, you know. And I walked in, and way in the distance I see this little tiny guy with what I thought when he turned around was kind of a high forehead and beady eyes. And he looked as if he were asking a question. That was the look on his face. And he didn't look anything like what I had imagined. But it was truly love at first sight.
There was no one that knew how to handle someone with Huntington's disease, so she got creative. She would sew elastic into his pants so he didn't have to struggle with the buttons and the zippers. She would put him in work boots so he wouldn't have to struggle with laces. Then, towards the end of Woody's illness, she met with the doctors and said, why is there no hope? Why is there no help for people with Huntington's? And they said, truth be told, we just don't have enough patients who are exhibiting these symptoms that we can learn from and we can find help for. And he said, if you really want to help, you could help us find patients with Huntington's. And so she put an ad in a New York newspaper and said, if you know anything about Huntington's, call me. And she kept going and going and going until she had about 35 families in the first year, and went back to the doctor and said, now what? And he said, well, to be honest, this is a neurological illness. So if you want to take the next step, we need some neurologists who can really dedicate their time and energy into learning more about this neurodegenerative illness. Marjorie went to neurological conventions around the world, set up a little table, and that everyone came over to the table. They just wanted to meet her and talk to her. She was so friendly. And so she got a handful of neurologists who were determined to find a cure, and then continued from there to try to get legislation passed so that there was financial assistance for families with Huntington's, and then even exceeding past that to families with rare diseases. And for 16 years, that was her primary focus, was to make a significant path forward in finding a cure for Huntington's, getting help for those living with it, and help for caregivers. And so that was the Committee to Combat Huntington's Disease, which then evolved into the Huntington's Disease Society of America.
I was playing a little show in this tiny little village in Italy. Via Rastelli was the name. There was this woman in the front row, and she was an older woman, must have been in her 90s, and she was grinning from ear to ear the entire show, and it was almost like she knew me, and I didn't know why. She didn't speak any English. Many of the shows in Italy are like that. And so we go through the show, and she meets us at the merch table, and she has an interpreter with her, and she tells me that Marjorie Mazia had been there in that same little village because her husband had Huntington's. And somehow she connected with this woman and met with her and got the information about her husband and met with him. And this woman was a painter. And so she created this book based on her experience with Marjorie. And just down the street from there was an actual center that was named after Marjorie Mazia Center. And I was so blown away that Marjorie's work had reached all the way across the world to this tiny little village in Italy. At that point, I think that's when I finally realized that, it's not all about Woody Guthrie. I don't know if there would be a Woody Guthrie that we know of today without her work.
She was able to help facilitate a handful of books being published after Woody passed away in the 70s and even into the early 80s. She's the one who got A Life by Joe Klein. She asked him to write the official biography of Woody Guthrie. She also published prose and writings in a couple of books, Seeds of Man. She helped facilitate the publication of a number of Woody's works. So the Woody Guthrie Center is dedicated to Marjorie in honor of all of the work that she did and the help that she provided, and keeping close connections with family members who are always available to help. She's everywhere.